Hello everyone! Welcome back to the Untitled Marvel Project, the show where we rank and review every single MCU film, except this time we are continuing our journey to rank and review every single live-action Spider-Man film. I'm joined by average Raimi Spider-Man haters Tucker and Abram. I'm your host, Tanner Dykstra.
Look at us.
The one true crusader for Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. I'm just kidding. These guys thought that first Spider-Man was okay. To be positive. We talked about that last week, so naturally this week we are talking about Spider-Man 2. Regarded by some as one of the greatest superhero films ever made. Does it live up to that title? Do we think that? Do we not? You'll have to watch this video and find out. If you want to watch other videos, you should subscribe to Backlog Banter. You should like this video. You should join our Discord for all our opinions on video games, movies, and life in general. Whew, that's a lot to talk about up the top, boys. But I'm ready to settle back, settle down, settle back, and talk about Spider-Man 2.
Settle in the saddle, settle into the saddle.
Let's talk about Spider-Man 2.
Okay, I'll talk about Spider-Man first.
Abram, go for it.
I think this movie is awesome.
Yo, yeah.
I really love this movie. I don't think it's one of the best comic book movies of all time.
No.
And I'd like to talk about that. Mostly because I think Doc Ock is not a terrible villain, as I'd like to talk about. I don't know. I genuinely don't know if that's a hot take or not. But I mean, on the whole, I really think this movie is awesome. I think everything that was poor about Spider-Man 1 has been completely cast aside here. It's only the good stuff from Spider-Man 2002 and a lot of weird Raimi stuff that really works, like the fucking horrifying Doc Ock sequence.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Which, awesome. There's just so much great stuff in here.
Yeah.
I certainly agree. I mean, this is what I wanted Spider-Man 1 to be. More confident, more comfortable, a lot more leisurely paced. Like, it feels really comfortably paced. The scenes flow very naturally. And my biggest complaint about the last one is that Tobey Maguire was a little schmuck and was delivering his lines with -5 personality. And Kirsten Dunst was even worse. And they're both better in this one. And I think especially Tobey Maguire really feel a lot more comfortable in the role and throwing some quips, dealing with the Parker luck. It works a lot better. And I think it fleshes out that world in so much more interesting ways that it makes the first one pretty obsolete. It's like, yeah, okay, that's the one with the origin story in Green Goblin, but I would just rather watch this one from every conceivable angle.
Yeah. I'll stake my claim and sort of spin off of what Tucker was just saying and saying that this is probably one of the best comic book movies of all time.
That's not what I was saying.
Well, your opinion be damned, Abram. But Tucker, what you were saying is, I think you can largely leave Spider-Man 2002 behind.
Yeah.
And because Spider-Man Homecoming does the same thing. They just forego the origin itself. And for people who know of Spider-Man in the popular nomenclature, Spider-Man 2 is the way to go. Because
that's a bronze dollar word right there.
Thank you very much. Because it is just, I think it's the peak of this franchise. Quite honestly, that's not a hot take. But you get all the things that Tucker listed off. You get Tobey Maguire finally getting comfortable in the role of Peter Parker. You get a lot of highlighting and importance put on his relationships with like Mary Jane and Harry Osborn, because this is the first time I'm seeing this since I was like 8 years old, maybe.
Yeah, around there for me too.
And like, there is a lot less Doc Ock stuff than I remember. It's still good and it's still in there when it needs to be, but there is a lot more highlighting on Peter Parker's life and struggling with balancing all these aspects of being Spider-Man and Peter Parker and a Daily Bugle reporter and a pizza delivery boy. Pizza time indeed.
God, the memes are just everywhere in this.
They're flying hot and fast in this.
They were coming a lot in the first one, but there's just moments from here that are unforgettable because they've just been memed to absolute fucking death online.
Yeah.
I also think, though, that this is a funny movie, too.
Yes.
I fucking love how long Raimi will hang on a joke. Peter trying to put the brooms back in the closet at the beginning of the movie is so fucking funny because it keeps going, and it's the same with that elevator sequence.
Yes, yeah.
The timing is so good in this movie, and I think that a lot of the fact that this movie's relationships works, its humor works, its performances work because of Spider-Man 2002. I actually don't think you can throw away Spider-Man 2002 because for me, what was so great about this movie is it paid off a lot of the stuff that felt unfulfilled from the last movie.
Sure.
I think it works so well in fleshing out the grief over Uncle Ben's death, that the great series of sequences, whether you're talking about realizing that Aunt May is about to lose the house, or when Peter finally confesses what he was doing that night. I think that stuff is great. I think the relationship between the three main leads is great, although I think that James Franco is terrible in this movie.
He's so bad. I think we start with James Franco.
Okay,
sure. We've sort of dabbled around a lot of general things, but
we'll talk from the bottom up. How about that?
Yeah, because James Franco is he doesn't feel integral to this plot. He feels like we're setting up a conflict to be paid off in a later movie, and because of that, whenever he shows up, like, oh yeah, I guess you are part of this unholy trinity of Spider-Man characters. But he really is super backgrounded, and he's not integral to the plot in any way, and it feels really strange.
Can I do a demonstration?
Go for it.
Oh,
there he goes. What's he doing?
This is like charades.
Yeah.
Oh, he's out of frame.
Man, my life is ruined. This whole fusion place blew up. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna go get in a car.
And there he goes. Abram, I know you can't hear this, but it's not far off. It's not far off, Abram.
No.
I think he has one good line reading in this. And maybe it's just because it's become a meme, but it's he humiliated me by touching me. And he puts the sunglasses on.
No, it's not good.
No, you know that's not good. It became a meme because that doesn't make any sense. Like he just comes up with that out of nowhere, and then edgily puts on his fucking cringy mid 2000s glasses. That whole sequence, and essentially everything about his character is just awkward and out of place and really uncomfortable. Because I don't think he does well in the role, and I actually think he was better in the first one because I believed his friendship with Peter a lot more. But in this one, he's edgy for the sake of being edgy, and it just does not feel right.
Remember when he has
one good scene.
What's one good scene?
One good scene.
Okay.
When he rips the mask off of Peter and he like staggers and drops the knife.
I was gonna say I think that was actually pretty bad. Because it is.
Well,
just like,
I won't go to bat for him. I think his performance is terrible.
Okay, fair. Because I do think James Franco's performance here, and maybe I've never really seen him in other dramatic role stuff, but I think this especially.
Great movie.
I think this especially reeks of like I just took my first acting class and like it's time to look shocked. Oh, what? It's my best friend. My best friend killed my father. No, it's a lot of that. But you know what? I'll hold out judgment for the third one. Maybe he's better than we remember in Spider-Man 3
with amnesiac Harry Osborn.
Yeah.
I know for a fact I have never seen Spider-Man 3.
Oh, okay.
Oh, exciting.
I know
exciting.
for a fact.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
That was my favorite one as a kid.
Tastes like cherries or whatever he says.
You said strawberries last night. I don't remember that line.
It's strawberries.
Well, whatever. We're going to see it next week.
Okay. Mary Jane. Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. Better in this one, I will say. Tucker, I kind of did see your complaints about her being a little flat in her delivery and stuff. More in this one, I think it's better, maybe by nature of just the more interesting MJ Peter dynamic that's written into this movie.
I find the MJ Peter dynamic tedious, but I think it's on purpose, so I don't really hold it against the movie. But I just find their off again, on again nonsense to not be very compelling on screen, especially when you get to the wedding sequence in the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. It just really starts to grate on me by then. I love the scene of the reveal when she finds out that who they are, and she's like under the fucking girder, and he's like, "This is heavy." Like that kind of fun banter that recontextualizes their characters is great. But on the whole, I still find MJ to be like a damsel in distress in a sense, but in an annoying way, because she is so much more interesting as a character this time, but all they really want to do is just throw her in situations when she doesn't really have an opportunity to show off who she's become. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think Kirsten Dunst is fine. She's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that she's really just okay. Because when I think Mary Jane Watson, I think the redheaded, yes, but fiery personality-wise girlfriend who is able to bring stuff out of Peter. But both of them are very meek in this, which is shut the fuck up. I saw your goddamn eyes go, your eyebrows just shoot to the goddamn moon when I saw that. But
I don't understand what's going on behind the scenes.
But I do think that their relationship works in the context of this film, and certainly a lot better than in the first one. Mm-hmm. but I agree, Abram. I think it's very repetitive is the problem. Grading, I think, is the word you used, but they do that exact same thing. It's like, oh, do you love me? No, yeah. Oh, but I love you. Yeah, no. And like it's picking up straight from that really awkward ending scene of the first one, straight into this, and then that happens multiple times over, which is just not great. It's not the way I want that relationship to be portrayed. But weirdly enough, it's almost not the focus of this film because it's more about Peter dealing with himself thinking about Mary Jane.
Right.
It's not mostly about their interactions with one another. It's him wishing he could be interacting with her and getting a lot of scenes of that on his own, which is where I think this movie shines its brightest is in Tobey Maguire dealing with Peter Parker's life and that being tangentially related to Jameson and Aunt May and Harry and MJ, but getting just scenes of him in his apartment or him being Spider-Man, him saving people, all those things, the balance between Peter Parker and Spider-Man, that's where this movie shines its best and why I do think this is probably the best out of this trilogy. But also I can understand why people would say it's one of the best superhero movies, but I just think that's kind of ludicrous when you think, okay, well, the romantic relationship is kind of weak. The villain is fine. You know, there's elements that I think hold it back, but that's where it's his best.
I think when I say that I do think it's one of the greatest of all time, I think what I'm really talking about is what you just said, Tucker. The emphasis that is on Peter Parker's life and the struggle between him wanting to live his life and him being Spider-Man, and the responsibility of being Spider-Man, if you will. Because I think that with the power of Spider-Man, there is some responsibility. I think that I think the line goes something like that.
When you got a little bit of power, there might also be responsibility as well.
But I do think this film has that in spades, and it just knocks that sort of line of theming across out of the park, not across the park, out of the park. I do want to say one thing though. Before we were talking about MJ, I want to give Tucker some props for a little thing that he picked up on. That I had never thought about. When MJ goes in for the kiss in the cafe before a taxi gets thrown through the window, she says, "Kiss me, I want to see something," after Peter Parker says, "I don't love you." And that could be read as, and I always read it as like, oh, it's just like a sappy romantic thing. But Tucker brought up the fact that she's probably kissing him to see if he kisses like Spider-Man.
I mean, that's just explicit in the context of the film.
It's explicit in the context of the film because the scene before she kisses John Jameson upside down, which is clearly reminiscent of that scene in the first one.
I didn't catch that at all. Let's move on.
let's actually talk about Peter a little bit.
Let's talk about Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I really think that Tobey Maguire comes off as a dork, but not a creep this time around.
Yeah.
I think his performance is a lot more wholesome. I think his performance is a lot more interesting. Yeah. And he draws a lot out of the character that I really like. I love seeing him, this sort of struggle of maintaining his responsibilities, his friendships, and his failures, I think is really powerful. And especially sort of removing him from having the opportunity to escape into the Spider-Man suit, of trying to shoot the web, nothing. There we go. Oh, that would work. Trying to shoot the web and nothing comes out. Like, it's good. It's good stuff. I really think that they do a lot to put Tobey in situations where he can show off who Spider-Man and Peter are a lot better than in the first movie. And the sort of college age Peter just gets so much time to shine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely fleshes out his personal life a lot more. In the first one, his personal life was based around him learning that he was Spider-Man, and so it was like Spider-Man leaking into the Peter Parker life in a way that I feel like they should be separated but interconnected in the seams. So I really appreciated it when there was just time for Peter Parker to be Peter Parker, and I think that comes from one of the most interesting parts of this movie, which is the interpretation of the Spider-Man No More story. I think that's actually the real story of this film. The Doc Ock part is the flashy part, is the but I would say B plot of it. I think that Peter dealing with his powers, failing, and learning, like what you're saying, learning from his failures and applying that to his relationships is the core theme and focus of this film, and it does that very well.
Yeah. I think, what's at the core of this, and it's what Peter Parker says right before it's precious, really, if you think about it. Precious tritium. But it's what Peter Parker says right before he tries to get back literally into the swing of being Spider-Man. It's the advice that was given to him by
Pizza time.
by the Doctor when he says, "Focus on what I want." And while that can be simple, I think it is like the core of what Peter Parker's struggle is in this movie. He's like, he's trying to do so many things. He's trying to be a lot of things. He's not focusing on who he's supposed to be. Like, he's not focusing on
I think it's more who he wants to be, because the problem is that he's focusing on who he's supposed to be, and that doesn't work because he's supposed to fill so many different roles, and he has a hard time balancing that. Although his reflexes are very good, so he should be able to balance things better. But alas,
he's unfocused largely in this movie.
This is a great joke. Why don't you laugh?
Is what I'm getting at. He's unfocused. He's trying to do a lot of different things, and he's failing at all of them. And I think. Speaking of failure, I do like how he comes to terms with a lot of the failures that he sort of brushed under the rug. I think there's a great scene, 2 great scenes, in fact, between him and Aunt May. The one where he confesses that he was responsible for Uncle Ben's death, and then the following scene between those two, when she basically acknowledges the fact that he is Spider-Man and he has a responsibility, wink wink, to do these things and like be Spider-Man not only for the people in his life, but for the people of New York who he protects, and like the little Jimmy Hawkins from across the street or whatever. I think those are 2 fantastic scenes, and they highlight Rosemary Harris, who we didn't talk about last week, and we got some messages in the Discord from our friend Seth, who this is his favorite Aunt May, and I tend to agree. I think she probably fills the role of what Aunt May is supposed to be in a Spider-Man story the best.
I genuinely do not remember who Aunt May is in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, so I can't.
Sally Field.
Okay.
But I agree. I think those scenes are really great. I think this movie does a really awesome job of taking its time to really chew on this material in terms of who Peter is, in terms of the themes they're trying to evoke. I really think that is why this movie is so good, when especially the majority of the movie, you don't see Spider-Man. And I think that's really effective. And I love the scene of him going back into the burning building, saving that girl, and coming out and realizing there's another person on the 4th floor. The way they work Peter back into Spider-Man, I think is as effective as them taking him out of the role. I think that is all great. And I think it leads to what I would honestly say is one of the best action sequences in a comic movie period ever, which is the train sequence.
Oh my goodness
the train sequence, I think, is really good. I have a little bit of an issue with that, and I think it comes from the fight choreography of actual Doc Ock and Spider-Man hitting one another. I think there's moments in between there that are great, and I think the set piece of the train careening and him having to deal with that and the people being inside and everything, that's all great. But I don't think the fight choreography is that good. I think the fight sequences are just fine, but they're few and far between in this movie, surprisingly, which is why I don't think it's not a huge issue, but I really do think they could have been better.
I think for me that it doesn't really matter a whole lot, because the success of that scene for me is not just the action itself. I think for me the scene really gets going when Ock leaves the train and Toby is on in front of him.
I agree. Yes.
And that's where it gets really good. Ultimately, I think the fight choreography is fine. I think the fight where May has been taken by Ock and they're outside of the building is really great. I think the movie does have some really excellent choreography, but the train sequence for me isn't necessarily about the fight. It's about Peter literally to the edge of his body's capabilities, stopping this train and then passing out, and the people in this like religious imagery sort of carrying his body like back over and letting him down onto the ground. And the sort of relationship that we start to see between him and New York in the first movie is paid off so beautifully here in a way that I just don't think that most superhero movies attempt to tackle. It really is a beautiful scene.
The movie is great in those slower moments, in the ones where you're able to see how Spider-Man has impacted the world around him, and New York has gotten used to, over the course of 2 years, having a superhero flying around, and kids like, thanks Spidey, and there's women like lusting after him and all this weird shit.
I love the scene with the 2 kids when he stops, or no, it's not even Spider-Man, never mind, but I love his interaction with the 2 kids who's like, hey, eat your green vegetables or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Sorry.
But the one thing I was going to say about the film handling these slower moments is that it does really well, and as I was saying, it's leisurely pace and the scenes feeling like they're well spaced out and it's not rushing. But there are a handful of exceptions to that in these really weird tonal jumps where you'll cut from the most heartfelt, deep, like powerful scene, and then bam, like hard cut to Doc Ock fucking building something with his monkey arms and the fucking crumbling things. Like,
they're actually octopus
okay,
arms.
all right. But I do think that was. I think that kind of feels like studio cuts. Like I'm sure there is another scene that Raimi filmed of after Peter talks to Aunt May, going back to his apartment, sort of unwinding, like realizing he has rent due or whatever the fuck, like any kind of mundane thing to make it not seem as jarring when you cut from the end of a heartfelt sequence right back into Doc Ock monkeying around, which is actually, and Abram mentioned this in the Discord, him not being a huge fan of Doc Ock, that him mentioning that really recontextualized my opinion on the character's involvement in the story, because I'm learning to lean to agree with you that Doc Ock kind of feels out of place in this, and that does make him not a great villain.
Let's talk about Doc Ock. Can I just say one thing first?
Sure.
We got Jim Norton in the bizarre cameo in the first movie. We got fucking Joey
Diaz
in this, which is equally weird.
If you want to get him, you gotta go through me.
And the other guy steps out front
and also me first, though.
But all right, let me lay out my issues with Doc Ock, if I may.
Okay.
I think that he has. So.
He has some extra arms.
Right. And the arms are the thing that really fucking annoys me about the character.
Oh.
Okay.
Because you could set up what is, I think, an equally compelling villain, or actually I would say a far more compelling villain, if the arms were not some sort of horseshit AI that take over the Doctor. Because if the motivation for the plot, well, first of all, building these arms is a fucking ridiculous plot contrivance in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's a comic movie. Let's go with Green Goblin's just like a fucking party city man, so who really cares?
Okay.
He built these arms. But the impetus for him becoming a villain is not the fact that his excesses killed his wife by throwing glass to her throat, which is a really shocking scene. The impetus for the villain is that the arms have AI and there's an inhibitor chip in his neck, but the inhibitor chip is broken, so the actual villain is 4 octopus arms that are controlling the Doctor, and so now these arms want to create fusion to create fusion, and the Doctor
whatever
can't.
The fuck I reason, yeah.
The Doctor can't really control them, but he kind of can at the end, even though the inhibitor chip is gone. The villain is so fucking unrelatable and devoid of motivation. If it was the Doctor killed his wife and now it snapped him, and now he wants to make the fusion happen to like kind of at least retain something from his life, there's a character motivation, there's a character. But otherwise we have 4 CGI arms controlling an overweight Doctor, and that's the villain, and it just feels completely detached from everything happening.
See, I would say that what you just said is his like that is his character, is that he killed it. Maybe we don't get it enough, which I would agree with, but he did kill his wife. You know, he's narcissistic in the way that, you know, he basically, people call this like a plot contrivance or plot hole or whatever, but he invited all these people to view this, him building a miniature sun with 4 robotic arms, and he has them stand like 30 feet away or whatever. He's never tried this before. I think he's I don't know. I'm forgetting the word I'm looking for here, but
I know
he's
what
overconfident.
You're saying,
he's overconfident in the fact
that
he's headstrong and he fails. And I think what your point of like him doing the fusion thing to sort of regain that part of his life, but he's become dark and twisted now. I think that is his character.
I agree, but I don't, because the scene after he leaves the hospital, and I want to talk about that outrageous scene in the hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
But when he arrives and kind of like wakes up from the trance, that's when he realizes the inhibitor chip is gone, and his motivation for continuing the fusion is that the arms told him to do it.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And that's my problem.
That's the thing. It's not that the combined character of Doc Ock and his arms don't want to create fusion to like make up for the mistake or whatever, but it's not Otto Octavius's idea to do that. Yeah. He's not like brooding like, fuck, I really shouldn't have messed up. I need to do this to prove myself, and then like I'll do any means to get it. It's the arms going, we need to steal money. Ooga booga. And he's like, no, actually, that's a good idea. I will do that right now. And I think because of that, it is a weird way to integrate him into the story. I like Otto Octavius as a character. I like his mentorship role and friendship with Peter. I like the fact that Peter is able to sort of bring him back to reality at the end, and he sacrifices himself. The idea that there is a good man still inside there is an interesting idea for the villain, but he also is, as I was saying, he's kind of the B plot of this movie.
Yep.
Spider-Man no more. The Parker luck. Peter Parker's life and the balance between Peter and Spider-Man is the focus of this film. Doc Ock does not get that many scenes, and when he does, he just shows up to go boom, boom, fucking all sorts of crazy CGI shit going on. So you aren't able to like really connect to him too much as a character, which was not the case with Norman Osborn, who showed up a lot as Norman Osborn. He interacted with Peter as Norman Osborn a lot of times, so he felt a lot more weight when the two of them clashed. Doc Ock and Spider-Man just fight because Spider-Man's stopping Doc Ock until the very end, which is a whole fucking can of worms of what the fuck is his plan there. Yes.
Shit. So Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, is chasing down Peter Parker because he knows that Peter Parker can lead him to Spider-Man.
Yes.
So in order to do this, he's like, all right.
In order to get Peter's attention.
He tracks down Peter. He's like, all right, he's in this cafe. Now, I need to ask Peter. I need to get information out of him where Spider-Man is. Step 1, throw a taxi cab directly at him through a window. He doesn't know that Peter Parker's Spider-Man. At least we're not supposed to think that he knows.
I don't think there's any reason to assume that.
No. Yeah. So, what? That's a weird, plot hole in the script.
I killed him! Now I can't get Spider-Man!
Fuck! But I think because you guys bring up great points about the flaws in Doc Ock's character, but I think I can just largely overlook it because it feels so natural in this movie, I guess. Maybe it's just because I know Doc Ock as the villain in this movie, but it feels natural. I love that he has some stupid 60s comic booky lines where he's like, you got a train to catch, Spider-Man. Oops, I maybe I do know that you're Peter Parker. Or he has other lines in the bank or whatever, but I think Alfred Molina is great. I think him and Tobey Maguire have a good rapport. I love that Peter Parker has some more quips when he's fighting him this time, I think it just works all around. If we're done talking about Doc Ock, I do want to I have to draw attention to J. Jonah Jameson. J.K. Simmons.
No, we're not done. We have to have the fucking the hospital sequence.
Oh, hospital sequence. Okay,
the hospital sequence is insane.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Insane.
I think that's probably my favorite sequence in this film.
Yeah.
I am a horror movie fan, and the way that Sam Raimi brings back his horror movie roots to just create this fucking thing. But I think that's not even the horror aspect of it. It's not my favorite aspect. I think the establishing shot with him on the table and the arm stretched out and the things draped over it and the one's missing and then it gets right into it. That all creates a really unique tone. That is like, all right, this is a really unique way to introduce a villain really in his full form.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
I love
fantastic.
I love the little Evil Dead reference with the doctor reaching for the chainsaw a few times. And
my god, Bruce Campbell's so fucking funny in this.
Yes,
and it's the usher. Holy shit, he's so funny.
He's like, hey, you might want to fix your tie. Oh, your shoe's untied or whatever. He's like, he walks up. He's like, how can I help you? He completely resets. He's like, you have to look perfect before I talk to you. I love also the Evil Dead thing in the hospital sequence when the camera in the arms. That's like an Evil Dead traveling through the woods thing. But Abram, do you have anything else to say about that? You brought it up. I want to time.
It's just absolutely outrageous. It does not fit at all in the context of the movie, but I don't really view that as a negative. It's just this absolutely peculiar, confined part of this movie that I really love. And what it makes me kind of sad about is that we never saw Raimi get like a Carnage Venom movie or something.
Yes.
Like if he could just make a fucking horror movie in the Marvel universe, that would have been awesome. But just as this just pulpy
Sam Raimi's Morbius.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi's Morbius. As this pulpy sequence, it's so fun.
Yeah. I think that's probably where Sam Raimi gets to harken back to his early days and do like what he really, really loves to do, which is just cheesy horror stuff like that.
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is, again, fantastic in this. There's just more of him, which is even better. The relationship that he has with all the people in the office, and he's just bouncing off of them.
God.
Every single line is gold. One of my favorite moments is when he's like, oh, man, Spider-Man was a good guy. And then he throws the thing off the wall. He's like, he's a menace! He's a menace to the city! He's a criminal! He's a thief!
Yeah.
I
It's
want
awesome.
Spider-Man.
It's so fucking good, man. I honestly think that J. Jonah Jameson as no, other way around. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, they're fucking the same person in my mind.
Exactly.
Is the best part of this whole trilogy. I can take or leave most aspects, most actors of these films, but J. Jonah Jameson is the core of these films from a quality writing perspective. All of his lines hit, and all of his facial expressions, and that leaning his head back and laughing, his fucking throat out, all of that hits so well that it, as I said in the first one, outshines the stuff around it. I think that's actually his performance and the writing of his scenes is higher quality than everything else in the film.
Okay.
I mean, I disagree with that kind of, but I still love his performance. And not that he's bad by any stretch, but I just don't think he's as big of a highlight for me. I just love whenever he shows up and he becomes just sort of like melting pot for all these plot lines and ideas. They all come back to him, and he always has some kind of witticism about them. It really is. He really is very good.
Okay, we need to give this sweet baby of a film a score. Okay.
Okay, fine.
Maybe Tanner, you might be able to convince me to do that.
Let's roll on over to our little sheet here. Our document.
Shut the fuck up.
Okay.
I've got a number queued up.
I've got a number in there.
I gotta go.
3,
and
2, 1. Okay. All right. Okay. We're higher than last week, if you can believe it, with an average score of 8.7. In ascending order, I'll go this time. We have Tucker at an 8.3, Abram at an 8.7, and me at a 9.2. Does anyone have any comments upon the score?
I think that sounds very reasonable to me.
Yeah. Speaking of the score,
it's also exactly the score that you gave it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Speaking of the score, Danny Elfman again put his whole pizza time into this one. It slapped so hard.
I want to reference one more thing before we close out the video. Yeah. I love the way Spider-Man moves in the air. I love the way that he puts his whole
pizza time
into these sequences as he's swinging, the way his body moves, the way the camera follows him, the way that he uses the webs for momentum, and that's really focused on in this movie. I love the way he moves in the air.
Yeah. I think that, just in closing, this is a perfect encapsulation of what people love about the Sam Raimi trilogy. It's firing on all cylinders, with maybe some critiques you can make, but it's just wrapped up in a package so well, with a little bow on it of Sam Raimi just putting his whole heart into this. I think it's near perfect, to being fully honest. But
it's good. I think it's the childhood Spider-Man that I remember, and it holds up surprisingly well. I went into this with pretty low expectations, coming out of a bad taste in my mouth with Spider-Man 1, but watching this made me realize that there's a lot of quality here, and I think it's just the experience with the first one, learning from the mistakes, and fleshing this one out a lot. Does that trend continue into the finality of the trilogy? Well, we'll fucking see. But I do think that this is where a lot of those elements shine the brightest, and I'm happy I can join the enjoyment train. Yes. Though I still do think it's personally, I think it's pretty ridiculous to call it one of the greatest comic book movies of all time when you can heavily critique the villain and his involvement in the storyline and his motivation, and some of the performances are a little lackluster. I do think there are elements that take away from this in a pretty significant way, which make it not that 10 out of 10 or even 9 out of 10 that I wish it was.
I mean, I think the villain is the only thing holding it back. I mean, what are we going to do? Fucking start listening at the good comic book villains? We'll get to like 3 of them or 4 of them.
That's a fair point.
I really think that what this brings to Peter as a character, brings to the theme, brings to the heart, the feeling, this really is a lot more inspired and interesting and thought-provoking than the majority of superhero films for me. I do agree. However, I agree with Tucker that I find Doc Ock so weak that it does drag the film down from excellence to greatness for me.
Sure. Well, speaking of greatness and speaking of childhood nostalgia, we will be evolving and finishing off the Raimi trilogy with Spider-Man 3 next week. Much maligned against, it's one of those movies that had a very interesting arc in history. That was, everyone hated it at the time, even though it was like the most successful of the trilogy. Then it was for a long.
It's still the most successful Spider-Man movie? Is that true?
I have no clue.
I doubt it with Homecoming and things.
Then
But
it had a long period
That's
of
the thing.
time where everyone agreed it was the worst of the trilogy, and now we've sort of entered the era where people are like, Spider-Man 3 is good, actually. So we'll see where the three of us fall on that sort of that plane of existence that you have to mark yourself on with Spider-Man
I've never
3.
seen it. I'll be fresh.
Abrams coming into this fresh. This is the one that he watched the most as a child, according to himself.
I mean, I've seen Donkeys making a masterpiece video for Spider-Man 3, and so I'm already going with pretty high expectations.
And I'm gonna try and be positive on this one because I also have this as a pretty low score on Letterboxd right now, but I'm gonna try and see the highlights of it, while also being very willing to make fun of it. But that'll all happen next week. Thanks for watching, everyone.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next time.
You ever just think about Richard Scary?
Who the fuck is Richard Scary?
Remember the little guy who was like a worm with one shield and a little hat on?
Lowly? You don't remember Richard Scary?
He drove a little Apple-mobile.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Is that the author?
Yes.
Yes.
Richard
Okay.
Scary was the author.
And artist, I think.
I was eating an apple. I've got a very
Dick Scary if you're nasty.